The road of life is often marked by unexpected twists and turns. A budding entrepreneur at 13, Ken Calwell had drive, vision, and a strong work ethic. These leadership characteristics began to get him noticed. At 24, he landed a coveted position at one of the most recognized companies in the world, building an impressive resume while building a host of global brands. Ken Calwell seemed to have it all. But on the road of life, 1 second can change everything.
911, what's the nature of your emergency?
People think that my story is about how I almost died. But the real story is about life and about the lessons that I learned through the challenges that I went through. Good morning. Well, my family and I, we moved to your beautiful Pacific Northwest, the Portland area here, about 6 years ago. And we love it. We absolutely love it here. And one of the first things that really hit us was when we moved here was just the choices, all the choices of things you guys have to do here. I mean, the idea that we could, in fact, we did it like the first week here, that you could drive an hour and a half one direction and go up into the mountains and hike and ski and see all the beauty that's up there, and then turn around and drive an hour and a half the other direction and you're at the coast, probably one of those beautiful coasts I've ever seen, the Oregon coast, or an hour down the Columbia River Gorge, and you can go hiking and kayaking in the gorge, and just all the choices that there are in this area to do. And so, what I wanted to do in the spirit of that was instead of just writing one message for you today, I actually put together two messages, and what I wanted to do was provide you guys the choice of which one you'd like me to give. So I'll do one or the other. You're going to vote, all right? So we have two choices today, and let me tell you first about what those choices are, and then you can let me know which one you'd like me to do. So the first choice I have is it's kind of themed around this bright, red, shiny, almost never used bicycle helmet, okay? So that's choice one. We'll vote here in a second. Choice two is, it's also themed around a bicycle helmet. This bicycle helmet's a little bit different. It's more used, a little bit more used, shattered, I'd say, actually. And so this is choice number two, okay? So by clapping, if you could first, those of you who would like me to do the talk this morning about this bright, red, shiny, never used before bicycle helmet, how many would you like to hear that? Okay, all right. And by clapping, how many of you would like to hear the story about this bicycle helmet right here? Oh, all right. Okay, well, all right, we'll do that one then. We'll put those slides up, okay. This one's blood-stained. Oh, okay, we still want to do that one, all right, we'll do that. This one starts back, we're here at the end of the Oregon Trail, and this one starts at the start of the Oregon Trail back in Topeka, Kansas, where I was born and raised. And it starts in like 1974, 75. And I don't know if you guys remember, but back then, those of you around, oh man, the cars that were out back then were cool, right? Fastback Mustangs, Camaros, Firebirds, plus all the British cars, right? MGs, right? Triumph TR6s, yeah, Austin Healey's. It was just, cars were cool. And I was into cars. I loved cars. I drew cars, I read about cars, I dreamed about cars, and it was all about when I turned 16, 3 years later, when I turned 16, what car am I going to be able to get? So I was dreaming about it like crazy, and I think I was starting to drive my dad crazy because he was like, Kenny, if you really want a car, if there's some dream car you want, you can get it. You can get it. There's no, if you want a dream car, go get it. And that kind of threw me off a little bit because I grew up in a very middle-class working family, small town Kansas, and I wasn't used to my dad saying something like that. He said, no, it really goes back to goals. If that's your goal, if that's really important to you, if you really want to get a car when you're 16, you get a car, get anything you want. Of course, what you need to figure out is how you're going to pay for it. And the simple formula that I heard from my dad over and over and over again was this one, which was basically, set a goal, real quick, set a goal. If that's your goal, get a car, great. Then find something to do where you can make some money, work hard at that, focus on that, achieve that goal, and then set a bigger goal. Real simple stuff. And so that's basically what I did. I was mowing my dad's yard, and he said, you've got that skill, you do a good job in the yard, why don't you go down the block and see if there's somebody else that wants to get the yard mowed. And so I did, went knocked on some doors, found somebody, mowed their yard, mowed it like I did for my dad. He had pretty high standards. And pretty soon they called me back, and they said, would you come back and do it again? And then I mowed another yard, and they told their friends about me, and they told their neighbors. And pretty soon the business just grew. And over the coming years, I grew that business from a couple of lawns to 10 yards to 20 yards to 30 to 40. The business just mushroomed. And it wasn't very long at all before I achieved that goal of getting the car. And pretty soon I was ready for another goal. And nobody in my family had gone to college or graduated from college. And so there was a college down the street from where I lived. And so I signed up for that college. Kept my lawn business, worked on weekends, or went to school on weekends, went to school at nights and summers, and 4 years later, achieved that goal, got a degree. The particular career field I went into required a master's, and so same thing, used the formula, focused on a graduate school, went to graduate school, got a master's degree in business, and found the formula worked really well. While I was in school, one of the things I learned about was this new company. I say new company, but it's a very fast-growing company. It was called PepsiCo, and that was the dream company I wanted to go work for. Now, this is before the dot-coms, this is before Amazon and Google, but at the time, this was the company you just dreamed about working for. It was called PepsiCo, and PepsiCo had all of Pepsi in it. It had all of Frito-Lay, so all the snack chips, all the Doritos and Fritos and all those fast-growing brands. It had all of Pizza Hut, it had all of KFC, and it had all of Taco Bell. So a very big company, and a very fast-growing company, more importantly to me, and full of young people and attracting people from around the world to come work for it, and I just wanted to be a part of that. So I set that as a goal, worked hard towards it, interviewed, and got a job with them. And then, again, followed this formula, worked hard, and over the next 3 years, got promoted 3 times, and was working up the career ladder and just loved working there. And I found out that this same formula worked not only really well on the career side, but I was single at the time, and the only other thing I was focused on other than work was working out, because I really liked athletics, and I found that this same formula worked really well for athletics as well. And now, I wasn't your basketball player, football player, baseball player. In fact, I was really bad at all 3 of those. And in fact, in basketball, I went out for the team 3 years in a row and got cut 3 years in a row. And I remember the coach after the 3rd year came over to me, and he was kind of breaking down my game, and he said, "Listen," he goes, "you're not any good at dribbling the ball. I think you know that, and but your shooting game is really bad too, actually, and you're not really good at passing the ball." Or defending against the ball. And I'm waiting, and all of a sudden he goes, "You're a pretty good runner, though. You run pretty well in drills, And it was true. I really enjoyed it. Actually, the coach got mad at us and put us in running drills. That part I kind of liked. So, which is kind of a strange part of the game to like. So my basketball career is pretty much over at that point. So I went and I got into running. And I set goals, first to doing 5-kilometer races, and then 10-kilometer races, and then half marathons, and then marathons, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Did a number of marathons, and then I was kind of looking for that bigger challenge, that bigger goal. And the next goal the big thing in the late 70s, early 80s was the new sport of triathlon. And triathlon had just started, Ironman over in Hawaii in 1979, I believe. And so it was growing really fast. And so I really liked the sport of triathlon. And this is where you swim, you bike, and you run. And the typical races that I did, the swim portion was about anywhere from a half mile to a mile and a half. It just depended. Then you got out and you jumped on your bike. And the bike races that I did were typically around 20 miles to as much as 60 miles. And then you'd get off and then you'd jump on and go run. And the run was usually a 10K, but sometimes it was as long as a half marathon. Those are the distances that I was doing at the time. Loved it. Loved the sport of triathlon. And was training really hard, trying to get ready for these races. And I'd set a goal, and the goal was that I wanted to qualify for the U.S. Triathlon Championships. So every year, I built up the training schedule. By 1991, a typical day for me was I would get up in the morning, about 5:15 in the morning, alarm would go off, put my bike stuff on, go out, ride my bike across town, meet some friends of mine, and we would go on a bike training ride. And we would do anywhere from probably 20 miles to 34, 35 miles, depending on the day. Then you come back, shower, throw on your clothes, go to work all morning from 8 through lunch. And then at lunch, you go down, change, throw on my running gear, and I'd go out with some buddies of mine, and we would go run. And the running, depending on the day, 3 to 4 days a week, we would do anywhere from 4 miles to 13, just depending on the day. Then I'd come back, shower, work all afternoon, work through dinner, and then after dinner in the evenings, we had a master swim team that met, and we would do a master's workout in the evenings, 3,000 to 4,500 meters, about 3 days. So I didn't do all 3 of those each day, but usually 1 workout or 2 workouts each day, and it just rotated. And that was a typical week. Saturday was a long ride, or it was a long run, and then Sunday was day off. Church in the morning, go do errands, rest in the afternoon, and then Monday repeat it all again. And if you'd asked me in 1991, I was really focused on 2 goals. Goal number 1, I really wanted to get promoted to director at PepsiCo, and by the age of 30, and would have made me one of the youngest directors in the company. And then secondly, I wanted to qualify for the U.S. National Triathlon Championships. Those were the 2 goals, and I was focused everything I had on those 2 goals. So on the morning of August 8th, 1991, the day started really like any other day. Alarm went off at 5:15. I threw on my bike gear, jumped on my bike, rode across town, and I had a buddy that was across town, and he was going to meet me. Met him. We noticed that the wind was coming right out of the south that morning. Unlike beautiful Portland, Oregon, where you have nice big hills and mountains to go climb, we don't have those in Kansas. We have lots of wheat fields and cornfields, but we have wind. We have a lot of wind there, consistent wind. It usually comes out of the south, especially in the summer. And you always want to start by riding into the wind. And so we took off and we said, okay, it's going to be a ride south today and down a road called Greenwich Road. And we loved Greenwich Road, riding down that. It was really popular for cyclists because it was very flat. It was a very smooth paved road, a little wider than normal with a little bit of a shoulder on each side. And the best thing about it was that it was a rural road outside of Wichita, Kansas, and so there was very little traffic on it, particularly at 6 in the morning. And so we headed off down this road, and it was going to be about a 33, 34-mile ride. And I took the lead and just dropped down into my aero bars and started to get a really nice rhythm going and great cadence, and just looking down the road and watching the sun come up on this beautiful Kansas morning, and looking forward to a great ride. And as I did that and looked down the road, and like I'd done 1,000 times before, I saw a car, and the car was coming in the oncoming lane, which is no big deal, on the other side of the road, and it was coming down the road. And this one, as it got even coming up on us like this, it was different than the other cars. Because as it got there, it didn't go on by. It just all of a sudden just jerked, swerved, and it swerved right at me. And it was going 55 miles an hour this way, and we were going 20 miles an hour this way. And I just took the handlebars and I just jerked them to throw the bike in the ditch to get out of the way. But at a 70 mile per hour closing speed, there just was no time. And I looked down, and the bumper and the grill just went right into my left leg. And I just remember hearing these braking sounds. And then the power of the car going that fast, it threw me up onto the windshield, and went into the windshield with this side of my body. And again, more braking, just loud braking sounds. And the car going that fast, it pulled me along the left side of the car, and I couldn't get out of the way of it, and went under the back wheels and between the axle and the road, and got drug, and it was really loud. Got drug, and then the left rear tire went up over my right shoulder and kicked me out from underneath the car. I just remember all these loud sounds, and then all of a sudden, it just got quiet. Just got quiet. And then I remember opening my eyes, and I was laying on my back, and I'm looking straight up, and I'm looking at this beautiful Kansas sunrise. And then these waves of pain just kind of started coming over me and all over. And then I heard something, and I was like, I think that's a car. And I thought, I'm in the road, I got to get out of the road. And so you just do what you naturally do, right? Let's get up and get out of the road. And I went to do that, and almost nothing moved. And so I looked down, and I'm on my back, and I looked down, and I looked at my left leg, and I could tell it was very badly shattered and off going to the left. And so then I looked at my right, and it was broken very badly here and shattered, and I couldn't see the rest of it because my leg was folded back and underneath me, and I was laying on it. And so I went to move my right arm to get out of the way, but my right arm, when I looked right at it, as I was right-handed, it wouldn't do anything. It just sat there, and but my left arm worked. In fact, it wasn't that badly injured at all. And so I tried to just use my left arm to do whatever I could, and the only thing I could do was to kind of prop myself up so I could be seen by the oncoming cars. And I did it as long as I could. I think it was only really a matter of seconds. And then I just lost, the blood loss. I just got dizzy and dropped back to the road. And, it was just less than 2 minutes prior to that, I'd been this triathlete in the best shape of my life. And now less than 2 minutes later, I didn't have the strength to lift my head out of a pool of my own blood. And I was fighting for my life. And the emergency crews came, and they did a fantastic job, and they stabilized me somewhat, and they rushed me down to the emergency room of the trauma center at the hospital. And when I came to an intensive care unit and started trying to put everything together, what I learned was that a woman was going to work in the morning in her Oldsmobile Cutlass, and she had just, right at the time she got even with us, she had just fallen asleep. And when she fell asleep, she fell on her wheel. And the car, going 50 miles an hour, a little bit more, just jerked across the center line and struck us head on. And I also learned that my right leg was a compound fracture of the femur here. And I learned that my pelvis had been broken in 3 places, and that my right arm had been broken twice below the elbow, twice above the elbow. And out of those 4 fractures, 2 of them were compound fractures, and 1 was compound open fracture. And then learned that the main nerve supply to my right arm had been severed. And then the worst was the left leg, which had been fractured from the knee to the ankle 4 times. And 2 of those were compound fractures, and 1 was a compound open fracture. And but if you'd asked me, I thought, wow, well, I survived this traumatic accident. Now I got to start healing. But I was wrong. I thought the worst was behind me, but actually what I learned was when people go through a lot of trauma, it takes your body sometimes some time to absorb that. And so my vital conditions, heart rate and oxygen content in my blood, were all pretty good that day. But over the period of the next week, each day, they got a little bit worse. Each day, the oxygen content in my blood dropped a little bit, and went down. So by August 15th, a week after the accident, I could tell something was up because every day there came more and more doctors and more medical personnel and nurses into my intensive care unit room. More and more kept coming in my room, and they were talking faster. They're probing me, asking me questions, and they were just more anxious, fearful of their voices. And it just kept building, and the 15th was the worst day. They were pretty much in my room 24/7. And finally, as the day closed, it was about 7 o'clock, I think, and I asked the nurse on duty, I said, after the last doctors had left my room, I said, what's going on? What's going on? And she said, well, you went through a lot of trauma. And she goes, in fact, personally, I've been doing this a lot of years. I haven't seen anybody with this many fractures and this much trauma that's made it. And she said, and so we're doing what we can and working through it, but you've got a lot of issues that you're facing. And she said, the biggest challenges and the highest risk things that we're scared about is we're scared about blood clots, we're scared about stroke, we're scared about infection, and we're scared about a thing called pulmonary embolism. And she goes, and any of those things could, they could take your life. And we just don't know. And I remember as she walked out of my room, I just, you start thinking about that. And I was 29 years old, and in a room this large, I'm sure that there's a number of you in this room that probably have faced a life and death situation. And I don't know, I can't speak for you, I don't know what went through your mind when you faced that. For me, what I remember, the very first thing that came to mind was the question of eternity. And, or said simply, well, if I die, where am I going? What's next? What's next? And, I've shared my story with people across the country, and I've had a number of people come up to me afterwards who have had their own situations where they thought they might die. And I was surprised how many of them have said the exact same thing. That when they faced that situation, this is what came up, this kind of, what's next? Where am I going? And I think that's a natural human reaction, right? I mean, I can remember as a kid traveling in the car with Dad on a vacation. How much further, Dad? Where are we going? When are we going to get there? I think the just natural human reaction is, if this is it, if I die, where am I going? So I started to pray, and I'm blessed. I was very, very blessed because I was raised in a Christian family, 2 Christian parents, loved me very much, and had shared the gospel of Jesus Christ with me. And so I knew the answer. I knew that if I died that night, I would be in heaven with Jesus. I knew that. My faith is very simple. It's simple then, it's simple today. I believe that God is a holy God. He created me. He created us. I believe that He is holy, and I'm not, and I'm far from it. I'm a sinner. I've sinned a lot. I sin every day. And I believe that because of that, I fall short, that I can't possibly be good enough to be with my holy God, not on my own. But the great news is that God loves me. He loves you. He loves everybody in this room very, very much. And He says that a lot in the Bible. There's a lot of those words, but also His actions back that up. His love is action. His love is loving us so much to send his only Son, Jesus Christ, to come down from heaven, to live on this earth and live the perfect life that I could no way ever do. And because he lived that perfect life, he can then willingly go to the cross and die on that cross and pay my debt, pay our debts, pay for my sins, because he's the perfect sacrifice for that. And he did that. He did exactly that. He came down from heaven. He died on the cross willingly. He rose again from the dead, defeated death, and all of our sins are forgiven. He did it all. And so to lay in that bed and to know that I didn't have to do, I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't go to the bathroom on my own. I couldn't do anything. I could barely move this left arm. That's all I could do. But I could do one thing, and the only thing important to do was to know that I could, it's the only thing we all have to do, is to know that if I just said, I know I'm a sinner, God. I know that you love me. You sent your Son to die for me. He did, rose again, and because of that, I'm saved. And as that room got really dark that night, and I'm in there alone, to know that if one of those things took me that night, the next face I would see would be Jesus in heaven. That brings an incredible sense of peace. And let me tell you, an intensive care unit of the hospital, especially on August 15th, 1991, was not a peaceful place. There were doctors coming in and out of there, nurses coming in and out of there. You see these people that are some of the smartest people. You know they went to school way longer than you did, and they're way smarter than I ever will be. But you can tell they don't have the answers, and they're concerned, and they're nervous, and the anxiousness in their voices. But I would argue that I had maybe more peace than almost anybody in that hospital that night, because I knew the next step. So I knew my destination. I knew where my destination was going to be, and that brought an incredible sense of peace. And what also happened was interesting was I'd gotten worse every day until August 15th. And it's not like I then made a miraculous recovery, but I started to flatten out that day. And over the next couple of days, my condition didn't get any worse. And it started to stabilize and then started to turn a little bit and get a little better. And while I had my destination figured out, what I didn't have is my journey. I knew, let me say it a different way, I knew that God had saved me from a horrible accident. How could it be anything other than God? Nearly a 4,000-pound Oldsmobile Cutlass strikes a 152-pound triathlete at almost a 70-mile-per-hour impact head-on. Which one would you bet on? God saved me. I knew that. But I didn't know what God had saved me for. You know, you lay in that hospital and you think of all the things you've done wrong. You think of all the things you wished you'd done that you didn't do. And God saved me? For what? Why am I here? Why am I still here? That's what I had to figure out. Over that time period, of course, I'm asking lots of questions. I'm asking doctors and nurses, what's going on? What's going on? You know, and I'm trying to get information out of them. And I'm driving them nuts because I'm saying things like, so when am I going to start walking again? When am I going to start running again? When do you think I can do my first triathlon? And they're just looking at me like, oh, really? And one of these. And so I'm getting this day after day, but finally I'm getting a little bit of information out of all of them. And finally I got them to share with me kind of all the information that they knew, and that formed kind of the following 5 points. The first one was, they said, Ken, you got to quit talking about this running. It's highly unlikely that you're going to run again. Those legs were very badly shattered. And Ken, part of that is because your left leg, I know you have it right now, but it's very likely you could lose that left leg. It's going to be a while before we know. And it's highly unlikely. We think you've severed the nerves in your right shoulder. We don't think you're going to have any use of that right arm again. And next, Ken, we want to continue to test you for the impacts of a head injury that we think you might have had. Now, I was wearing this helmet, but you know, when you strike a car that many times and and you hit the ground as well, the helmet's really not made for that. And it shattered, and it was by the time they found me, it was off of me. So they were concerned about that, and they wanted to do a lot of memory tests and a lot of logic tests and communication tests, etc. And finally, obviously, I had the high risks that I mentioned to you before. The high risks of blood clots, infection, and pulmonary embolism. So that's a tough list. That's a tough list. But, it's weird. I look back, I didn't like that list in 1991, but I've looked back at that list now over the years, and I look back at it as a little bit of a blessing. And that may sound strange to you, but, if that list had just had a couple of easy things on it, let's say it this way. I know for me at least, when my life is going well, and easy, or when I just have a couple of little, minor issues to deal with, I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to kind of go, I got this one, God. Don't worry about it. I can cover this. No problem. I got it. Which is ridiculous, but it's the way I am. But when I had this list here, there was no risk of that. That list, I say, will put you on your knees to pray. For me, it put me on my back to pray. But it gets you to the same place, which is I can't handle that list. I need God. I need God. And my prayer life changed completely. I remember that one of the first prayers that I did, I got some verses that were given to me by different friends. And one of them shared with me Philippians 4. It's still to this day one of my top 2 or 3 favorite verses. And I've prayed through Philippians 4 thousands of times. And I love this verse, and I wanted to share it with you. And maybe it can be a comfort or encouragement for somebody here who's going through challenging times. Anytime I'm facing challenges, I pray through this. It starts off, the Lord is near. And you know what? The verse could probably stop right there. Right? It's like you're alone in a hospital room. Nobody can give you the answers to any of the questions that you ask. You feel alone. And who's near to you? It feels good to have anybody near to you. But the Lord, the creator of the universe, is near. So exactly what am I going to worry about if the creator of the universe is near? And that's what the next line says. Do not be anxious about anything. Don't be anxious about anything. Didn't say, don't be anxious about anything unless you've been hit head on by a car going 70 miles per hour. Then, woof, you got real issues. Doesn't say that. Doesn't say, do not be anxious about anything unless your leg shattered in 4 places. And that's off the... No, there's no conditionality to it. It says, do not be anxious about anything. Don't fear anything. I love that verse. Why? Go back to the first. The Lord's near. Creator of the universe is near. What are you worrying about? As I sat there in that hospital bed, you learn real quick, you're not in control of anything. God's in control of it all. But in everything, by prayer and with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. How often should you pray? Pray about what? Pray about everything. Prior to the accident, I will tell you, I prayed at mealtime sometimes. I prayed at night before I went to bed. That was probably about it. That changed completely. Pray through everything. And by the way, what does he promise? And the peace of God, not the peace of man. We've all experienced the peace of man. Does it last? Nope. Is it consistent? Nope. This is not that. This is the peace of God. This is peace with God, knowing your sins are forgiven. Wow. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding. I love this. Which surpasses all understanding. Because when people have asked me, what did it feel like when you're praying through that with God? I don't have words to describe the peace that I felt. I don't. But I can say the peace of God, which surpasses all human understanding, that sums it up. That sums it up. So through the next 3 weeks, I was able to get well enough to be able to graduate out of intensive care. My condition improved enough to where I moved into the regular hospital. And as soon as you do that, I immediately sat down with my surgeons, my doctors, my nurses, we formed a group, and I said, let's put together a plan for how I can get the best chance of healing. And we worked out a really great diet and make sure I was eating nutrition, the right food, and getting the right rest, the right physical therapy, the right training. And as part of that, the surgeon who did my work, he shared with me, he said, listen, that's your objective, right? You want to give best chance you save your leg and be able to walk or run again. I said, absolutely. And he said, well, here you go. Number one, you have a finite window. You have a short window here from the day of the accident for about 3 or 4 months. And you want to get those bones to start to heal in those first 3 to 4 months. If they don't, the chances of them healing after November or December this year drop precipitously. So you've got this fixed window. This is your time to get that leg to heal. I go, got it. He goes, second thing. He goes, one of the ways to really get bones to heal, to stimulate bone growth is that if this is your leg and now your leg is broken in 3 places, the best way to get it to heal is to get those bones to come into contact with each other. And when those broken sides of the bone touch each other, come into contact, get pressure, that'll stimulate bone growth. And that'll give you the best chance of saving that leg. That's all you need to tell me. I'm like, I'm all in. That's great. Well, let's start walking. And he said, I don't think you're going to want to do that. And I said, no, let's start. And he says, well, I've put this frame on your leg, and that frame on your leg allows you to stand. And when you stand, those bones are going to come together. They're going to touch. And I was like, great, then let's start walking. I mean, this is somebody, I was running 40 to 60 miles a week right before this accident 3 weeks ago. The fact of standing, come on. So I finally convinced him to let me stand while they're holding on to me. And I stood, and as soon as I put weight down on that left leg, those 3 bones came together, chunk, 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 just like that. And I learned something. Turns out that bone fractures touching each other sends a signal up to your brain. If you ever want to get sleep, that'll pass you out real quick. I'll do that. So that was tough. But eventually, I was able to get up later that day and just stood up and was able to take 7 steps that day. That's all I could do that day was take 7 steps. And 7 times that leg came together, chunk, 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 each time I set it down. Now I say I took the 7 steps. That's not true. I talk about praying continually, and I literally learned during this process to just lift that leg, and you know what's going to happen when you set that leg back down. And as I take that step, I learned to pray to God, and I guess I call it texts. It's like texting God, shooting up a prayer literally on every step. Just 3 weeks prior to this, I was praying once or twice a day. And now, I was literally praying to God for every step. And He honored those prayers. And the next week, I was able to get that up to 20 steps. And the next week, 40 steps. 2 weeks after that, I walked a quarter of a mile, getting those bones, just trying to get that to heal. And this continued through September, October, and November. And I knew that November I had to get this thing had to heal into November, or else I could lose the leg, because I didn't know still. So every other week, I would go to a doctor, surgeon 1 week, and get x-rays, and they would look to see if the bone was healing. And then the other week, I would go and get this neurologist to stick these needles in my spine to my shoulder to see if the nerve was firing. And all through September, all through October, all through November, every week the report came back negative. Wasn't seeing bone growth, wasn't seeing the nerve growth. And that went on and on, week after week after week. I'm praying through it. I'm walking further each and every week. On November 22nd, 1991, I went to my orthopedic surgeon and got the x-ray, went in his office. The x-rays come in, puts them up on the wall like I'd done 1,000 times before, looked up at him, and he takes his glasses off. Well, I can see from over his shoulder. I'm like, oh, the bone's blurry. I go, I must have moved during the x-ray. I got to go walk back down the hall and get another x-ray to drag. But he puts his glasses on again. He takes them off, puts them on, pulls them off, looks over at me, and he goes, that's some new bone. That's some new bone. I think you may keep that leg. And that's a good day. That was a really good day. But the day got better. The day got better because I got to go across town and tell my physical therapist about the x-ray and the great news. And I thought who could have better news than that? But he quietly listened to my news, and he was very happy for me and gave me a big hug. And he said, you got a second? I said, yeah. And he goes, me and the other physical therapists and some of the nurses, we've been talking, and we just have watched you through this recovery process and your spirit, and we were wondering if you would not mind. We have some patients that have gone through some really serious trauma and have gone through some, and we were just wondering if it's all right, would you be willing to go meet with them and try to encourage them and pray for them and just maybe inspire them to get better. And I just looked at him, and I still couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't feed myself. I still couldn't drive, couldn't work at the office, couldn't do anything triathlons, couldn't walk, couldn't run. And to have this group come to me and ask me to go help other folks who are going through the same trauma, some of the traumas I've been through, that was awesome. That turned a good day into a great day. Because what I really learned that day was that God didn't just save me from something. God actually saved me for something. God didn't just save me from something. God saved me for something. He saved me so that I could go make a difference in some other people's lives and help them through the toughest time of their life. And over the coming weeks, that's what I got to do. Go sit down with these folks and start praying with them and talking to them about what they went through. And I can't even tell you what that meant. I don't know what it meant to them. It meant so much to me to be able to be used in that way. And it literally, I don't know how else to describe it. I used to read the word joy in the Bible, and I don't think I even understood as a kid what joy meant. But I did this day, because all of a sudden, to me what joy is knowing why you're here, knowing what God has plans for you, and Him using you to make a significant difference in other people's lives. That brings joy. And knowing He's there with you every step of the way. And what did God save me for? Love. Love. Ultimately, I don't think I knew it at the time, but as I spent time with these people, what I found was that that's what they were looking for. They were looking for love from somebody who understood what they were going through. The other thing is that I had been taught since a small child in vacation Bible school and Bible class, Sunday school classes, etc. I've been taught, love God. We should love God. You should love God. If someone asked me, I said, yeah, I love God. But I said it from here because I knew that was the right answer. After the accident, and I read what Jesus said, he said it, this must have been important because he said it 3 times. He said it in Matthew. It was recorded in Matthew, Mark, Luke. In fact, there's a reference to it also in John and in Romans. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. I can tell you that what changed for me was instead of just saying the words, after the accident, I loved God from my heart for what He had done for me. And what I found is when you just are so thankful for what He's done in your life, you can't help but share it. somebody tells you to keep your faith private, it's almost impossible when you feel that kind of joy of what he's done for you. And I think it's really interesting that the very next thing Jesus said was, and love your neighbor as yourself. Because you know what, for me at least what I found is, sometimes that can be really hard to do. Easy to say, love your neighbor as yourself. Very hard to do. But what helps me is the first part. When I realize how much I love God for what he's done for me and how thankful I am for what he's done for me, the love just comes out to be shared with others. So with lots of prayer, lots of physical therapy, lots of prayer, thanks to the grace of God, just 9 months later, I got a chance to walk a full 5-kilometer race, my first 5K since the accident. Just 1 year and 2 months later, thanks to the grace of God, lots of prayer, that right arm that nobody thought would work again, because for a year and 2 months I had no use of it, and the doctors had started to really give up. And I'll admit it, man, you pray that prayer for a year and 2 months and you start to wonder yourself. But I kept swimming. I was swimming with one arm to try to reteach my body that, hey, here's one arm. Come on, arm. You need to go now. And remember how we did this? Remember? And I just kept swimming, and this thing would just drag and bang all over the place. And one day I was swimming, and all of a sudden it just not dramatic, but it moved a little bit. And I went in to get it tested, and actually they still didn't believe it. They just thought I was wanting it so bad. But over the coming weeks, sure enough, it started to move a little bit. And just 1 year and 2 months after the accident, I started to regain movement in that right arm and started to be able to do triathlons again. Just 1 year and 4 months after just 1 year and 4 months later, I was standing in my church and that Sunday morning and looked down the aisle, and this beautiful girl walked in. She walked right down the aisle to become a member of my church. And I saw her, and I stalked her. And so that doesn't creep you out and stuff. Remember, I'm not moving very fast. So she could get away from me if she wanted to. And 3 months after I saw her, I asked her to marry me. And 3 months after that, I got to use that right arm to offer her, and I walked her right back down that same aisle in that same church, and we got married. That was a good day. And speaking of love, just 2 years and 1 month later, I got to use that same right arm to hold my son. And wow, Casey Reed Calwell was born. And I don't know, those of you who've been in that situation, you're laying in that hospital room not knowing if you're going to make it through the night, and then to be there that day to see God give you the gift of life, son. It's just an amazing time. Just 5 years later, the Olympic Committee contacted me and let me know that they wanted me to use, I guess, those same legs that some thought would never work again, and use that right arm that some said would never work again to hold the Olympic torch and run in the Olympic torch relay. And that was special. Just 13 years later, I got to use that same right arm to ring the bell at the stock exchange in New York as we took Papa Murphy's public and did an IPO. By the grace of God, just 23 years after the accident, I got to go watch, first triathlon I've ever watched, I got to watch my son, Casey, compete in his first triathlon, and he won it, which was really cool. And a year after that, got to go and climb a mountain in Zermatt with my son, Casey, and it was really special. And so here we are. So have a bad accident, recover from the accident, and life's perfect, right? Lived happily ever after, the end, right? Yeah. Because the Christian life is easy, right? Right? It's all easy. Is that what Jesus said? It's all going to be easy? No, there's parts I left out, like after I recovered and after I was back at work, one night, in the middle of the night, big Kansas thunderstorm comes in, and lightning strikes my house, and it burns to the ground with everything in it. So wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Wait, what? I just noticed the people here in the front tables are starting to move back away from me. Who is this guy? What's up with this? No. Jesus never promised that our life on this earth would be easy, that the Christian life would be easy. It's not about easy and comfort. In fact, he said it very, very directly. In this world, you will have trouble. You will have trouble. There may be lightning strikes. There may be sleeping drivers. There's challenges out there. So don't be surprised by it. This verse actually brings me a lot of peace, because Jesus told us it would be so. And it is, in my experience. But the really comforting part of this verse comes right after it. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I, Jesus, have overcome the world. Fear not. Again, how many times in the Bible is it, have no fear, do not be anxious about anything. Jesus has got this. We just got to ask him to be there with us through it. And he's faithful, and he will be there with us through it. And what I've learned is when he's there with us through it, our present sufferings, these temporary, short-term, little sufferings that we go through on this earth, they dim in comparison. They dim in comparison to the glory that will be revealed in us, to the plan that God has for us. Because we know that all things, God works for the good of those who love him. He's with us through all of it. He's got a bigger plan. He's got a way bigger plan. We just need to be faithful and obedient to that plan. You know, I started this presentation out today, and I talked about how my focus prior to the accident was really on success. You know, and setting goals and trying to achieve those goals. And there's nothing directly wrong about that. I mean, I still set goals. I still want to achieve goals, right? We all do. And there's some value in that. But you know what I found was, is that whether it was those triathlete goals or marathon goals, or whether it was career goals, they never really fully satisfied me. There really wasn't a sense of contentment. I always had to set a bigger goal. And then that one didn't really make me content either. What I learned after the accident was this thing I call significance. And since the accident, and since the physical therapists, the doctors asked me to go meet with other patients and invest in them and love them, I found that we're capable of, and God equips us to make a significant difference in the lives of people we love. Sometimes it's hard. It's hard to love people, but my experience is if you pray about it, God will answer that prayer. He wants people loved, and we're here to do that. And when you do that, and you really invest in somebody and serve them and love them, my experience has been that's the significant difference, and that does satisfy. It does create a sense of contentment that you're making a difference in other people's lives. So then it's, well, how to do that? And what I've found, for me at least, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, I think in this crazy world, I think of this world today a little bit like that intensive care room that I was in on August 15th. That's the way the world feels to me. How many more CNN news alerts are we going to get tomorrow, right? The world's gone crazy. And the world kind of feels a little bit like that intensive care room with all the anxiousness and people worried about stuff. And what I found is that if you have the peace of God, the peace that God loves you, the peace that God has forgiven all of your sins, and you know where you're going, you know that when you die, you're going to be with Jesus in heaven. If you have that peace, it's unique, and people are attracted to that. I've also found that if you really, truly love Jesus and you know he's with you and you see him working in your life and you know he's there side by side with you, that there's just a joy that comes over you, a joy and a love for God, and a love for God that overflows to love for others. And so all of a sudden, these three words that up until the accident, quite frankly, just reminded me of a Hallmark Christmas card, became much more than that to me. They became a way to reach others, to try to show this peace, show this love, and show this joy to those around me, and hope that it attracts people to what's that all about. So then it's a question of, well, how fast can I get that peace, joy, and love, right? I mean, why would I put it off? Really, before the accident, I was really committed and focused on triathlon goals. I was really focused on career goals. But I'll admit to you, these other things, I said, I'll get to that. But I think that we shouldn't put off those kinds of things. And one of the things I learned in the accident was one thing I call the 1/3 second rule. And the 1/3 second rule was some guys that lived on my block were a bunch of engineers. We lived in Detroit for a while, and so there's all these engineers from GM and from Ford. And they heard about my accident, I guess, and I was walking up to the block party. We were walking up to this cul-de-sac, and I'm walking up to this cul-de-sac, and I got my wife's big salad that she made, and I've got a wagon with toys in it, and I got my 10-year-old son, and we're walking up to this, this block party. And as I walk up to the block party, there's these three engineers that live on the block. And I knew them, and I'm about to say hi, and one of them said, "So the car, 50 miles an hour, right?" And I go, "Huh?" And they go, "And you were 20 miles an hour the other direction." I go, yeah. Oldsmobile Cutlass, probably around 4,000 pounds. I don't know, yeah, maybe. 2-lane road, yeah. And the other engineer looks over and he goes, "1/3 of a second." And I go, "What?" Engineers, So 1/3 of a second. And I go, "I'm sorry?" He goes, "You had less than 1/3 of a second to react. You had less than 1/3 of a second." Salad? Do you guys like a salad? But I thought about it. The weeks after that, they told me that. And I thought about it, and I thought about it since that time. And one thing that came to me was this. Woke up that morning to go for a 33-mile bike ride. 8 miles into the ride, I had 1/3 of a second. So if I wanted to get my life in order and do the things I needed to do to show peace, to have the peace, to share joy and love with those who mattered most to me, I had less than 1/3 of a second. So what I've tried to live with ever since then is tried to live with a sense of urgency, as I call it, living life on purpose. And so not put off those things that are so important. And so to that end, I'd just like to, if you guys would like, I'd like to do that right now. I'd like to just to close with 2 prayers. The first prayer is a prayer about destination, about what comes next. And so if you could just join me real quick. Heavenly Father, I know in a room this big that there are people who come, and I just thank you for bringing them here. I know that there are people that would like to have more peace. They'd like to have the peace that can only come from you. And Lord, if their hearts are ready, I just ask, Lord, that you would have them stay afterwards, and there's people here that would be happy to meet with them and pray with them in more detail. I'd be happy to do that as well. But Lord, I just ask that if there's people in this room that are ready to make that commitment to you, that they would pray along with this and make these words their words. Heavenly Father, we believe that you created us, that you are holy. We believe that we're sinners, and that we, by our own strength, we're not capable of being good enough to come to you on our own. But we don't need to. We believe that you love us. You love us so completely that you sent your Son Jesus to die for us on a cross and be raised again to defeat death. And he died, and when he died, he took all of our sins on that cross, and we are completely forgiven. If we believe in you, all we have to do is believe that we're sinners and that you sent your Son to die on a cross and rise again, and our sins are forgiven, and we are set free. I ask this in Jesus' name, amen. The second prayer I'd like to pray is for all of us on that journey, and just as an encouragement maybe to everybody as we take the next steps and leave here today. So if you just join me one more time. Heavenly Father, we love you very much. We love all that you've done for us, that you've sent your Son to die for us. We know, too, that we have people that are in our lives that you put us in contact with. And I pray, Lord, that you would just put the name of at least one person on the mind of everybody in this room. That person could be a wife or a husband. It could be a son or a daughter. It could be a coworker, a parent. Please put a name on everybody's heart and mind right now. And Lord, I would just ask that your Holy Spirit would work and would work through our thoughts, that we would pray for that individual over the coming weeks, and that we would show our love to them through the things we do, and that we would draw them closer to you through our words and actions. I ask all this in your name. Amen. On August 8th, 1991, my helmet was shattered into 7 pieces. My bicycle was shattered into 38 pieces. The 1987 Oldsmobile Cutlass, the bumper was caved in, the grill, the radiator, the windshield. The car was totaled. They had to actually bring a wrecker and haul the car from the scene to the junkyard. On August 8th, 1991, God was done with that helmet. On August 8th, 1991, God was done with my bike. On August 8th, 1991, God was done with that Oldsmobile Cutlass. But on August 8th, 1991, God was not done with me. And he's not done with anybody else who's in this room today. The fact is that a lot of people refer to this as my bad accident. Well, it was not. It was not my bad accident. It was actually God's great plan. And God has a great plan for everybody in this room. Thank you very much.